Hey guys, and welcome back to Easier Said Than Done. I want to tell you about the first time that I submitted a pull request, what at Google is known as a change list. The first time I submitted a pull request at Google, okay, my stomach was a knot. I can still feel and recall and re-experience that moment, right? So every one of the red diffs on the screen from the change request, from the change list, it really felt like I was exposing myself to criticism and judgment. Like I was just standing in the light, no place to hide. And worse, I was really terrified that someone would think I was not good enough to be there. I mean, after all, I was a 39-year-old ex-lawyer, right? I'd been a lawyer till I was 37, and I'd only just learned to code a couple of years before. And here I was at Google. Like it was just psychologically quite intense. And so that little voice in my head, well, it was not so little, it was really loud. It was stuck on this nasty loop, right? Again, they're going to find out. They're going to find out that you have no idea what you're doing. They're going to see that you're not good enough. You don't belong here. And I felt like a fraud. I was surrounded by these people who are actually just normal people, but in that moment, they looked and seemed to me like genius coders, which is a myth, by the way. One of my colleagues at Google also did a very famous talk on this, about the myth of the genius coder. But I felt like a fraud, surrounded by people I thought were genius coders that just seemed to get it. And I remember feeling so clearly like I just don't belong. Like, what have I done? Welcome to Easier Said Than Done with me, Zubin Pratap, where I share with you the tens of thousands of dollars worth of self-development that I did on my journey from 37-year-old lawyer to professional software engineer. The goal of this podcast is to show you how to actually do those things that are easier said than done. And I remember feeling so clearly like I just don't belong. Like, what have I done? How am I going to survive here, right? And the fear of not being good enough. And worse, that everyone else would see it instantly and wonder, hey, how did you get into Google, right? Like that was the narrative in my head. It was so difficult. And even after I left Google, and I left on really good terms, I left in a very positive way because I've done really well. My team got great performance reviews, but I wanted to work remotely. That's why I ended up going into one of the best companies in the Web3 space. Great team, a lot of ex-FANG engineers and stuff. And I was surrounded by brilliant people again. And again, that feeling of not being good enough followed me there, right? And maybe it always will. Sometimes I think maybe as long as I'm constantly stretching myself to go to the next level, it probably always will. And by the way, that advice out there about fake it till you make it, I think it's a terrible idea because if you don't have the skills, you can't fake it. But with the skills, then what you're doing is you're not really faking it, but you still have to deal with your inner game, your self-belief, your psychology. So today, we're going to dive into how to ditch all that fake it till you make it rubbish mentality. We want to level up your skills. And I'm going to help you learn how to get the most out of a code review process because especially initially, it'll be very uncomfortable, right? And this advice that I'm going to share with you, or these insider perspectives, they apply, guys, whether you're in big tech or not. It doesn't matter, right? What I'm going to share with you are the meta principles that apply to your entire coding career. So, in my first month at Google, I was completely overwhelmed, right? It was a new engineering environment, new team, everything was new, right? And, it's the world's most gigantic monorepo, okay? Like, it's just a lot of text. And at the end of my first month, I started working on my first change to the code. Like there was so much time to set up and training. And I was writing code in Golang, a language I knew nothing about at the time. And it involved writing Kubernetes applications and making changes to something in that. And again, I knew nothing about Kubernetes. It was hard. Everything was hard. This is when I realized that reading code is so much more important than writing code when you come into a company, when you get into a real world situation, when you leave the tutorial world and move into a real company. It's not the writing code that matters. In fact, my previous job was a tiny startup, so there was a lot of writing code. But the moment you get to a big company and you're having to read a lot more code than you write, so I've done a lot of other podcasts on this and other LinkedIn posts on this as well. Anyway, so for this particular first change that I was making to the code, I worked very late. Obviously, I tried to polish every line I could. And keep in mind, this is 2020, I think. So, the Gen AI movement, the Gen AI breakthroughs hadn't yet happened. There was a lot of AI-enabled tooling at Google, but it wasn't the way we use it now, right? So I had to, literally go through every line, every little character and make sure I understood what was going there and get it right. And so anyway, I reviewed my own change 100 times, and then I sent it for a code review to the code reviewers, to get LGTM looks good to me from a code review. And all of this is, there's solid process. I'd never seen anything like it. It was a lot of it was automated, but a lot of it just needed you to know how to use the automations, right? And the code review I got back was brutal. Honestly, it was really, and okay, maybe it wasn't brutal. Coders are very direct, right? And I'm still getting used to that. So maybe it felt really brutal. I actually think that was it. I don't think she was being particularly I don't think she was intending to be brutal in any way. Just terse, direct, very engineer-like, right? But I still remember one of the comments that said, "This is inefficient." And I think it said, "Check Blaze targets history in the name of the application," which is another application that wasn't directly related to mine, but which I was interacting with. And again, keep in mind, world's largest code base here, right? So all of these terms are new to me, very new to me. And there's no explanation, not much more guidance. And, that can happen a lot, right? When you're in a bigger company. I didn't realize it then. I hadn't thought about it. But when you're in a bigger company, heck, even if you're in a company with 50 engineers, other engineers are not going to know from your change request necessarily whether you're relatively junior or not, depending on the change and depending on what you put in it. But a lot of the times the changes can be pretty small, and very targeted. And so they're not going to know whether you're experienced or not. So they're going to assume all sorts of knowledge, history, background, and prior knowledge that you may not have. They don't know that you don't know. They don't know that you're new. They may not even know you're new to the company, right? So in this example, no explanation, no real guidance, and it felt less like a technical discussion and more like a personal attack, because I was contributing a piece of code to a code base that the code owners, the maintainers of that piece of the monorepo were really another team, right? And so I really felt kind of attacked at first, and my confidence just immediately evaporated, right? Now, before I go on too much more about that, I want to tell you something about Google's development infrastructure. Okay, now keep in mind that at this point of time, I was self-taught, ex-lawyer, 37, learned to code at 37. By 38, I had my first dev job, and I was 39. So I had only 1 year of professional development experience at a small, very fast-growing startup, but very small. There were 4 people. That was my experience before Google, like completely different from Google. So I'm going to read to you what someone with 20 years of development experience felt when they first started at Google, right? So let me share with you the experience of somebody who was 20 years as a developer before they moved into Google, just to let you know, just even with 2 decades of experience, how new and overwhelming and massive things can be for a developer, right? And there I was with 12 months of experience behind me. So let me share my screen for those of you who are listening, and I'll read this out, right? So this is from someone who, from 2016 to 2018, they were a senior SWE, and so they recounted this experience after starting at Google, right? When an engineer first joins Google, and I'm reading here, so for those of you listening, when an engineer first joins Google, they start with a week or 2 of technical training on the Google infrastructure. That is correct. I worked in software development for nearly 2 decades, and I've never even dreamed of the development environment Google engineers get to use. I felt like Charlie Bucket on his tour of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, astonished by the amazing and unbelievable goodies available at any turn. Now, I will quickly add there, for someone 20 years of experience, they understand why all these things exist. They have always wanted them because they've been around so long, they've seen the pain points and problems. For someone as new as me, I didn't even know why we had this fancy tooling. Like, it was just completely new. Guys, in my team, we didn't even use Git or GitHub because GitHub wasn't big enough for the size of the code. Like, I cannot even begin to tell you how big the scale of things at Google are, right? And how sophisticated, therefore complex for someone new it is. Anyway, back to his reading. The computing infrastructure was something out of Star Trek. The development tools were slick and amazing. The process, and he italicized this process, the process was jaw-dropping. While I was doing a hello world coding exercise in Google's environment, even a 20-year-old developer has to start there in a new environment. So yeah, while I was doing a hello world coding exercise in Google's environment, a former colleague from the IE team pinged me on Hangouts chat, probably because he'd seen my tweets about feeling like an imposter as a Swede. There you go. It happens even at that level. He sent me a link to Click, which I did. Code from Google's core advertising engine appeared in my browser in a web app IDE. Now, let me just pause there and tell you. A web app IDE is not like VS Code. It's like what VS Code does now, which is VS Code in the cloud, where you can access VS Code in the browser. But Google's had this for over 10 or 15 years. Google has their own internal IDE called Cider, right? And so they use that in the browser because the code is just too big to fit in a machine. So they have everything done in the cloud, the build, the writing, everything, right? So anyway, so the code appeared in a web app IDE. Google's engineers have access to nearly all of the code across the whole company. Remember what I said, the world's largest mono repo, right? This alone was astonishing. In contrast, I'd initially joined the IE team so I could get access to the networking code to figure out why the Office Online's team website wasn't working. Neat, I can see everything, I typed back. Push the analyze button, he instructed. I did, and some sort of automated analyzer emitted a report identifying a few dozen performance bugs in the code. Wow, that's amazing, I gushed. Now push the fix button, he instructed. This isn't some sort of security red team exercise, right? I asked, which is actually quite funny because that's exactly what I would have asked in that position. He assured me that it wasn't. I pushed the button. The code changed to fix some unnecessary object copies. Amazing, I effused. Click submit, he instructed. I did, and watched the system compile code to run in the cloud, determined which tests to run, and ran them. Later that afternoon, an owner of the code in the affected folder typed LGTM, which is Google's approved changes by typing an acronym for looks good to me. LGTM is looks good to me. And so they did that on the change list that he had submitted, and my change was live in production later that day. I was, in a word, gobsmacked. That night, I searched for the entire code base for misuse of an IE cache control token and proposed fixes for the instances I found. Now, why am I sharing that with you? Well, it was really the beginning part that was more important, right? For the point I'm trying to make, which is Google's infrastructure. Actually, all of big tech, I understand it's the same at Amazon and another big tech company. They have massive infrastructure because they are bigger than some of the biggest clients or customers they have, right? And because they're so much bigger than a lot of other big companies in the world, they need custom infrastructure. Now, as you can imagine, that is incredibly intimidating. So back to my code review, that single extremely uncomfortable bit of feedback that was not uncomfortable because it necessarily criticized me, but it put me in a position of really feeling exposed and completely incompetent, and like I had no idea how to fix the problem, right? So that single experience taught me so much because I had to then fix my attitude and psychology to get the most out of it and to actually successfully complete that code review, which I did later on. Hi, if you want a no BS insight into how to change your career, whether to code or something else, and how to actually get job opportunities in tech, then please subscribe and like. It's no BS because I have zero incentive to mislead you. I just want to help you and give you tons of value so that you will consider working with me to get to your next career. Take a look at the description text below to learn more about the training I offer. Also, you may find my newsletter interesting. I've linked to it in the description. I only mail about 2, maybe 3 times a week, and it's pretty focused. It's usually around industry trends, things I've learned from other developers, the common habits and pitfalls that I see in my students that affect their ability to succeed, that prevent them from actually succeeding, case studies and insights from that. So you'd probably find it quite useful. And hey, if you don't, you can always unsubscribe later. No problems. But I do post content here regularly. And by subscribing and liking and hitting that notification bell, you will get to know when I post new industry insights for you. You'll also know within about 3 seconds if you want to learn more, but at least you won't miss out. Oh, and please follow me on LinkedIn too. I pretty much post there every single day. Just look for my name, Zubin Pratap. All right, so please like and subscribe to this channel, and let's get back to the episode. That single extremely uncomfortable bit of feedback that was not uncomfortable because it necessarily criticized me, but it put me in a position of really feeling exposed and completely incompetent, and like I had no idea how to fix the problem, right? So that single experience taught me so much because I had to then fix my attitude and psychology to get the most out of it. But it forced me to learn how to separate my code from my ego and turn ignorance and the dark energy of my imposter syndrome into fuel. It's a lesson that I've honestly carried with me through every big tech company that I've worked at since, but there's a catch. There is a catch. Understanding how to extract all the juice and growth out of code review is not a technical skill. It is very much an emotional and attitudinal skill. It's a choice, but it's a choice that must be renewed every day. So then that way it becomes a lifestyle. And this lifestyle of right attitude, right thinking, right choices, and right action is what I end up teaching in the Inner Circle program a lot, because it guarantees success no matter who you are, where you are, what you do. Not just in coding and career change, by the way, but everything in life, right? Right choices and right action come from right thinking. So let me share with you the 5 lessons I learned from that deeply uncomfortable experience in that code review. And as you're taking this in, I really want you to imagine yourself using these 5 points that I'm talking about to turn any painful feedback you get in code into your greatest source of growth. Okay. Look, we all want to become better engineers. The reward is obvious. We get more interesting work, we get to work with better people, we have greater impact, and the confidence that comes from the pursuit of mastery. We get all of these things. And of course, we get the benefit of climbing up that intellectual ladder to the next level, the financial ladder to the next level, and the self-belief ladder to the next level, right? But the path to confidence and competence is 100% paved with criticism, negative feedback, and those kinds of things. And many developers get derailed by it. In my case, the code reviewer was not being nasty. It felt nasty, but I don't think they were being nasty. And you will, in real life, encounter nasty people. That's going to happen over the course of your career. I know I have several times, right? And it's the lessons that I'm about to share with you now that help me to not react defensively, to not let my ego take over, and most importantly, allowed me to extract the lifelong lessons hidden inside that negative experience. So here are the 5 lessons that I truly believe, double my ability to grow from code reviews. Number 1, your code is not you. This separation is the most critical step. The reviewer is critiquing a single piece of work, okay, not your intelligence or your value as a person. Detaching your identity from the code you write is a really valuable superpower because it allows you to analyze the feedback objectively instead of emotionally, with a bit of detachment, a bit of separation. Because remember, your goal is to improve the code, not to defend yourself or to please other people. Number 2, always assume good intent on the part of the other person and then seek clarity. So I said earlier today that I received a brutal review, but then I corrected myself and said, maybe it wasn't brutal. Maybe it just felt brutal, right? Because I am assuming good intent here. And so what we want to try and do is assume good intent, seek clarity. Reviewers can often seem harsh, but they're actually just focused on the same thing that you are, right? The health, the code health, the quality of the project, the quality of the code. And just like you, they're trying to do the best job they can do, which as a reviewer is drive for that increased code optimization or that increased code health, right? This is a very core philosophy at the big tech companies. They're not trying to be mean. They're simply prioritizing directness to improve the outcome, to improve the quality of the code. Now, the wrong response to that is to argue or get defensive. And I know it's easier said than done. Heck, that's why this podcast is called Easier Said Than Done, because we talk about these things, right? The wrong response is to get defensive. The right response is to ask, once you've mastered yourself and put that separation between you and the code reviewer in your head, the right response is to ask, hey, thanks for the feedback. Could you elaborate on your reasoning behind the suggestion? Could you explain why you feel this way? These are the kind of sentences you can use. Or you may disagree with them. You may think they're wrong, right? Then disagree with their analysis or their conclusion, but not directly with them. So for example, you can say, I'm not sure I follow your conclusion. I'm not sure I follow your reasoning. I'm not sure I understand where you're coming from on this. Could you help me understand? My approach here was XYZ. Can you help me understand why that would not be the best outcome here? Invite them to discuss, right? This transforms a potential experience that could feel confrontational into a collaborative experience. And when you've implemented a change or you need to push back, it's very important. It's your responsibility to explain your reasoning clearly and politely. Don't assume that your reviewer knows more than you. Often they won't. Okay. Now, if you're submitting to someone's repository where they're the owner, yeah, you'd expect them to know at least as much as you, probably more than you, on the actual code, but they may not know some of the context behind your change. They may know their code base really well. They may not know the reason for your change really well. So that could be a source of pushback. And as an author of the change, if you're requesting someone to change their code, you're the one closest to the code that's being submitted as the change. And so your input is very valuable and it is your responsibility. Number 3, code review is unstructured mentorship, guys. So many people out there, especially the aspiring devs, want more mentorship. This is it. This is unstructured, informal mentorship. It's the best kind too, right? Because sometimes this mentorship is uncomfortable. Like good mentorship often is uncomfortable. I know my students in the inner circle often feel that way when I hold the mirror up to them, right? Heck, sometimes, an uncomfortable code review can feel like a personal attack if it touches an insecurity or a nerve that exists. That happens, which is why your self-awareness is a crucial piece of this puzzle. And This is also a core principle of high-performing engineering teams that I've seen, right? A senior engineer will give you basically free personalized lessons on how to improve your code or avoid specific pitfalls, or how to adopt a better design pattern, how to write more maintainable code, more readable code, more testable code, or how to think about a problem differently. So valuable. All that problem solving is there in that code review, right? And none of these things, guys, are things that you learned in colleges or boot camps or YouTube. That's why they're in your review, right? You learned about it because someone else was thoughtful about your code and took the time to tell you. That knowledge goes into your vault forever. You can't afford to reject it just because it wasn't delivered gently or in a way that you like. Sure, you can ask or hope for that, but at the end of the day, you're throwing the opportunity out if you say, hey, they delivered it in a rough way. I'm just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and not learn from it. Look, they're not looking for you to deliver perfect code, just better than what you've got there right now. And oftentimes, in fact, there are multiple right versions, right? Sometimes even a one-line comment can be a roadmap to improvement that triggers off a whole lot of thinking and research and self-reflection, and just, you want to read other types of code like that, right? It happens so many times to me that I'd end up just reading other people's codes because of somebody else's comment sent me down this curiosity rabbit hole in a positive way where I was learning a lot, right? The world just expanded. So one of the most important things that I learned is that the quality of the code is everyone's responsibility. The teams, you, the author, and the reviewer. Okay, everyone shares their responsibility in maintaining the edifice that is the code. Okay, number 4, thank you is your strongest response. Now, I know it's hard to do that when you feel like you're being attacked, right? So when you feel defensive, the most powerful thing you can do is pause and type, thank you for the feedback, or thank you for the thoughtful feedback, thank you for your perspective, thank you for the detailed feedback. Let me look into this. I'll work on this. Let me investigate more. That's the right thing to do, okay? It immediately de-escalates tension and signals to your team that you're coachable, that you're professional, and that you're dedicated to quality, the very traits of a senior engineer. Now, I can tell you from experience, this is the expected practice at the highest levels of tech. You should reply to every single comment, even if it's just to say, done, thank you, acknowledge, right? This shows respect for the reviewer's time and keeps the conversation flowing. Okay, number 5, the last one, you get to control the narrative in your head. You can let a bad review make you bitter for weeks or years. That is entirely your prerogative, but really, does it help you? Okay, or you can fix the code, learn the lesson, let go of your emotions, and hold on to the evolution that came from it, your growth. And that way, you'll be a better engineer by lunchtime. Look, you get to decide whether this is the story of your failure or your inadequacy, or the story of the growth opportunity that you came into this role to achieve, right? You took the role to earn a certain amount of money, to grow, to be surrounded by people who are better than you. And then when you get the gift of their feedback, they tend to take it negatively. I get it. It's a human response. But it's why we're there, right? The ultimate goal, guys, isn't to be right. There are so many different variations and opinions of what is right in engineering. The goal is not to be right or to win arguments. The goal is to deliver impact, raise your learning. You've got to be a bit selfish about it. Raise your learning, build your credibility, and become a valued member of the team, because that is a skill that you'll see in future jobs will come with you. It'll follow you. You don't want the harsh feedback to follow you. You want the growth to follow you into your next role and your next rung on the ladder, okay? Because harsh feedback is inevitable and it is uncomfortable. So look, I just want to conclude by saying that I want to share with you actually how I've internalized, these 5 lessons, right? There will always be people more experienced than you. Thank God. Okay, thank God. And if you're lucky, you will get to work with them. And if they criticize your code, that is a real opportunity. I truly have learned to appreciate this myself. And it still feels uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I'm sitting there Pollyanna and completely comfortable being criticized or my code being torn apart. It's rarely torn apart. But, my baby's I'm told my baby's ugly and I have to do something about it. It never feels good, of course. I feel shaken. I feel miserable. Lots of old self-doubt and insecurity will come back when I get negative feedback. That's just normal. But I've been through it so many times now. I've been through this dance a few times. So I also know that once that sting settles and you take stock of what you've learned, you'll have what remains after that is something that far outlasts the pain. you'll have growth, you'll have learning. No one can take that away from you. And that, my friends, is how you become an engineer who doesn't just write code, but an engineer who loves the growth and learning that comes from being an engineer. Okay, I really hope that was helpful. Like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.
Do it. Just subscribe. You know you got to do it.